Laser Pulse is brought to you by BW Tech Medical, a leader in light-based devices for over 30 years. Whether you're a researcher or a manufacturer, we help turn ideas into reality. Learn more at www.bwtechmed.com.
Hello and welcome to this latest episode of Laser Pulse, where we invite thought leaders to discuss the evolution of lasers in medicine and surgery. My co-host, as always, is Dr. Brian Pryor, researcher, scientist, entrepreneur, founder of LightCure Medical, and luckily a longtime friend of our guest today. The podcast is presented by the American Institute of Medical Laser Applications, AIMLA, country's leading source of online laser training, and it's sponsored by BW Tech Medical. Today's topic really is the use of lasers in medicine with an emphasis on dermatology and aesthetics. And we have the perfect guest for that, Dr. Eric Bernstein, founder and director of Mainline Center for Laser Surgery in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. That's a little outside of Philly. Graduated from Yale Medical School and then went on to get a master's in engineering from University of Pennsylvania. He's authored over 100 peer-reviewed papers. Fortunately for us, most of those around how light interacts with tissue. He's a former president of ASLMS, the American Society of Lasers, Medicine and Surgery. He's current vice president of ASDS, the Society for Surgical Dermatology. An international lecturer, visiting professor at Jefferson, and owns probably more lasers than anyone on the planet. If a laser was introduced into the market and showed clinical efficacy, it's at very high odds that there's one in Dr. Bernstein's office somewhere. So, Brian, as I said, you've known Dr. Bernstein for a long time. Why don't you help us get to know him a little better?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Andy. And thanks, Eric, for joining us. We go way back and doing many things and looking at many different applications, not just aesthetics, but Eric has done a lot of research at NIH and in PDT and very knowledgeable in how light interacts with tissue and laser medicine. But certainly one of the preeminent voices in aesthetics and laser medicine has helped many, many companies bring products to market. And we've dabbled here and there, done a couple things, and it's really a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to Eric. Some new venture comes up every time we talk and new ideas. So Eric, really thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have someone of your knowledge base and stature to be on the podcast.
Well, I really appreciate you having me here. And, as you're going through all that stuff you made up about what I've done in the past, I started thinking my whole career does center around light, electromagnetic radiation. I kind of came into dermatology through physics, not the other way around. I chased lasers into derm because I was doing PDT research as well as some other stuff at NIH in the radiation biology branch. And I guess, looking back, I was really fortunate to have such wonderful mentors along the way, people that were willing to take time and delve into the science. And, everybody thinks that when they were doing whatever they're doing, it was perfect and now it's no good, right? In the days of the giants, we walked to school uphill both ways in the rain. And, now the science is stretching a little, it looks like to me, especially in aesthetics. And I love that it's grounded in science. My first company was a high throughput screening model for photoaging, transgenic model of photoaging, developed at Thomas Jefferson with Dr. Yoni Wito, who was the chairman there. And they studied, it was, I think, the preeminent place in the world, certainly I'm biased, to study, because of him, to study extracellular matrix, collagen, elastin, hyaluronic acid, GAGs, proteoglycans. And that was kind of the foundation I went forward. So I studied the detrimental effects of sunlight on skin, and then the beneficial effects of laser to kind of reverse those effects, but also to do many other things. So it is true that because I like research, and in the old days, it wasn't lucrative. It wasn't there weren't that many people interested. So almost by default, I got to get a lot of the first devices, out of the gate, like the first one. And that to me is the most exciting thing. So if you look at, I was just treating patients before we sat down, and I was just saying to a patient, because they have to listen to me, they've got their eyes closed, and it's a perfect job for me. I can talk, and it distracts them, hopefully, from the slight discomfort of laser treatment, but of the vascular lasers and their development. The first vascular laser, the SPTL1, I think it had a 3 millimeter spot, made tremendous bruising or purpura, and fired a shot every 3 seconds. And then it went to a 5 millimeter spot every 3 seconds. And I just treated someone's face, neck, and chest with a 15 millimeter spot that fires 3 shots every 2 seconds. So I treated her whole face, neck, and chest. It would have taken like 6 or 8 hours. And then they would have been bruised like with dark purple, almost black bruising, with no bruising, massive 10 minutes. So there's been a tremendous evolution. And the two big lasers, of course, are the pulse dye laser that emits at 595 nanometers. Orange light. I don't know who's going to see the podcast, so I'm pretending it's regular people. I don't know. Hopefully, we'll get mainstreamed with this one. And then the other one's a KTP laser, green light laser. Again, I have one of those. We're allowed to talk about brands and all that. So I have the Candela
Oh,
V Pro, and I have the Derma V from Lutronic, which also has a very big beam diameter green light, 532, great for treating vessels and fast. So things have really evolved tremendously. So vascular lasering is one of my favorite things because it works so well. It's so selective. It targets vessels sevenfold more than the surrounding skin. And that's the real key to modern sort of lasers is targeting what you're aiming at and trying to avoid what you're not.
When a company comes to you and says, "Hey, we have this laser for XYZ," what have you seen? What makes it stick in the market, right? There's a lot of different devices that come, they go, but what kind of makes it stick?
You know why I'm smiling? Because you had one that should have stuck and it didn't stick. And largely it's one of so there are many things that make it stick, and we're going to land on one of them that doesn't help it stick. Because if you're involved with a laser, I know it's going to be the best there is. If you're involved with a LED or long light source, and I'm not just saying that because you're interviewing me, and that's why we know each other. But what makes them stick is a bunch of things, and some are good and some are not so good. If you look at skincare, sadly, I've rated brands on marketing and technology because I've been in that space a long time. I've consulted for almost all the big skincare companies over the years at some point. And, marketing plays I think too large a role in what gets adopted in skincare. Now, their margins are much bigger than device margins. They have more money to play with to direct to consumer marketing. But marketing's a massive piece, even in the laser space. But when somebody comes to me, the cool thing about a laser, I tell residents this, it's like a diamond, right? If I told you I had a 10 karat diamond, although diamond's a bad example, now you got these, you know, lab made diamonds. But a diamond, it's 10 carats, VS1, D color, and it's $1,000. Like I know what that means. I would buy that diamond. Well, if you have a laser, you need to know the pulse duration, right? The wavelength, the fluence or the dose you're giving, etc. And the spot size, you can know what it's going to do. So when someone comes out with a new laser, I think about what can this laser do? Because one way companies sell lasers, they say it does everything. That means it's cheaper, right? You're getting 8 for 1. Or they say it's cheaper. Or they try to brand distinguish and say it's better. So what really gets it out there is number one, it's KOLs. It's who you go to in the beginning, key opinion leaders. Who does the study? Who's got the trust of the other people that are going to buy that product? If it's a consumer product, you got influencers and all that. If it's a device, influencers have an effect on what patients seek out, but they have less of an effect on what doctors and practitioners, nurses, PAs, whoever's, med spas, whoever's buying the device. So that's really key opinion leaders, people that have over time garnered the trust of those in the industry and of companies. And generally speaking, when they come out with one device, you need FDA clearance. So you go to a practitioner and say, hey, we want you to do studies so we can get FDA clearance for indications like rosacea, facial redness, wrinkles, whatever, acne scarring, and you'll get people to do that work. And then that work sort of springboards to the next phase. And that's sort of how people like me in a smaller market like Philly end up with so many devices. If you're getting them out of the gate, you're buying them retail, you got to have a lot of doctors here and know what you're doing on the marketing side, which I do not, to get a bunch of devices. If on the other hand you're doing research, that research they're sort of stuck. You have a prototype device, they can't sell it to you. It's not, and then you do the research, and now you're their sole reference for their next, production unit. So that's sort of how you get a, a collection of these devices. But it is a very exciting thing. So I would say key opinion leaders, marketing, and really, industry events like the ASLMS, the ASDS, these meetings where physicians and others go, practitioners go, companies go to learn what devices to get on the market. That's how they get disseminated. And what I was teasing uh, Brian about is he had a laser device. And someone came to me who wasn't a laser person, said, we got this new hair laser. I'm like, what could that be? Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was most awesome. You could tell by that coffee cup with all those equations on it. If Brian is involved in something, you know it's going to be good. So those are really the factors that get it out there. And to me, that's the most exciting part. You get this new device. What can it do? Who do you treat? Well, you treat yourself first. And then you got friends like Brian and others that come in and you treat each other. And then you expand to your friends and family, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think over the years, right, like you mentioned earlier, the faster, right? So after you kind of prove that a technology can do an application, I think building on that's important for companies, right? To do it faster, to improve the workflow. I see so many devices that companies don't consider the workflow in an office, right? And you could use it, but really to catch on mainstream, if it's you got to go out of the way in the office to wheel it in or change hand pieces or do this. It's really something people oftentimes fail. Maybe not in the first generation, right? But in the second, third generations to really improve workflow speed, patient comfort. What have you seen in those regards?
Well, you just mentioned probably the most important thing that companies need to hear. And so you're right, ergonomics, spot size, what's important to me? You have engineers that are designing, and by the way, I can't turn, if you hear that, I can't turn it. I got a
We
message.
can't hear it.
I got laser people reaching after me with messages and questions. You know, one of the issues is communication between practitioners and scientists that build devices. And it's fascinating to me. And it's psychology, it's human interaction. You have deep science and then you have people. And there always is a crossover, always. So for example, in the old days, I was working with Candela, old days, and they'd send a box, I'd say what it like, they'd ship it back up there, then I'd make some suggestions. And then one day I said, this is ridiculous. Get in a car, it's in Boston, get like 5 engineers and drive down. Let's spend a day treating patients that give permission for you to come in. And let me show you what I'm doing. Let me explain why this is important. And that, to me, revolutionized laser development. And so, one thing you just said, maybe not in the first generation, I am so against that. Absolutely in the first generation. You get that prototype built, and I know what you meant. You meant the prototype, but once you get a production unit, there should be massive communication. The other thing that I found really interesting is with a lot of companies and people, with private equity getting involved in the laser space, buying up companies, buying up practices, whatever, you have people from outside the laser industry, right? From everywhere. Could be from McDonald's, could be from, Unilever. It doesn't matter, wherever people have business experience. I personally think I would be a great CEO, and I'm just being facetious, or president because I don't know anything. I'm not good at anything. I do know how to do laser stuff and device stuff, and that really is it. I'm lame around the house. I'm not like a real engineer. I'm not, my engineering degree was really management and engineering together. And so because I understand that I don't have a broad skill set, I know people like Brian, and Andrew here. I know people who really are good at all the things I'm not good at. I have friends that I went to school at Penn. So Wharton, I have a mentor, this guy, Jerry Wind. I reach out to people who know what I don't know, which is essentially everything. And what companies shockingly lack is you'll have somebody from completely different industries, say, I don't know, McDonald's, not listening to me, who they're hiring, to give them advice on what to do about lasers. And then you have engineers who've never treated a patient, arguing with me about how to treat patients. And, my lack of confidence in areas that I'm not in pretty much everything other than my few areas of expertise, I think is a massive asset because I know I don't know about these things. I'm doing a film now where I need music composition. I had a teacher tell me I was tone deaf. She didn't even tell me. She wrote it in her book, which I sneaked and looked at later, which means it was honest. And I need music for the film. And I just sent an email that said, you know what? They said, what do you want? I said, I want you, I'm working with Juilliard, to tell me what sounds, I'm not even going to say music, need to accompany this film because I have no knowledge. Now, I'll tell you whether I like it or not. That I can do, and I do have the ultimate say, but I know enough to show it to 20 other people, and if they like it and I don't, it stays, right? So that's the biggest hurdle with making devices. And Brian, I've worked with you a little bit, and we've talked in the past, and Sean, and you don't have that issue. And I know you wouldn't be afraid to treat patients either, which is something we could talk about. But I think that key point is the biggest thing I'd like people to take away from this, because it is a massive issue, and it's true of medical practices. They're owned by banks and different giant, PE groups or VC groups, and they don't understand treating patients, right? Not clients, whatever. So there's got to be better communication.
Yeah, it's complicated, right? Because it comes down to from making, buying, getting the equipment approved, all the way to patients. I mean, ultimately, patients are making the decision, right, to pay for it. Also, who pays for it, right? I think if you look at the laser field, the success of aesthetics and eye surgery, right, were the early adopters, and because it was cash, right? There was no insurance codes, there was no other thing. So people could really, I mean, the consumer is a big part of this, that they're seeing results, that they're willing to pay for the results.
Well, that's also a very good point. Direct-to-consumer marketing is very expensive, although, you've seen with the web, although now even the web obviously is very expensive. You get an influencer or whatever, costs a lot. But in the old days, it didn't. And I was actually part of a company that was a lead generation business for physicians with a bunch of computer people. So yeah, there is consumer demand. But one thing I've found almost universally is the fancy movie star people and tend to generally get treatments I would choose not to offer often. Shouldn't say generally, but more frequently than I could ever believe. There's not a linear correlation between what people pay or they're willing to pay and their status in society as a whole, their sort of, economic status and the treatments they get. And I think it's because I think it's probably because of the way we get information now, through the web. Anyone can have a voice, anyone can get out there, and the people that are the loudest and the flashiest aren't necessarily the most scientific voices, right?
Yeah.
You got a boring scientist like us, maybe people don't want to hear what we have to say.
What's the biggest misperception that you see out there, kind of in the general? Someone comes into your office thinking they want this or their perception about laser. What's the big miss?
Well, the big thing is, well, what's interesting that you can laser down bumps. And that's also a problem with laser development from engineers, scientists, physicians. Let's shave this down. They forget the skin's alive and it reacts to what you do. Oh, I got this bump. Could you just shave it down? I said, well, if you were a table, 100%. Even fractionated lasers, which I use every day, they've taken over, invented an MGH. I imagine the initial concept was if one full field treatment does all this, but you have all these nasty side effects, you burn away the surface of the skin. 520% treatments will do the same thing, and they will if you're a block of wood. But if you're a living tissue, you never have an open wound for that second one. You could do 100 fractionated treatments. You may not get the same results as one open wound that heals by contraction and all that. So the biggest conception is, well, first of all, I'm very specific about language. Those of us that have patents and write articles, you learn to be very specific. Improve, not remove. The biggest misconception, one treatment, everything's gone, and I'm ready out the door. So you have to set expectations. People say, I want this gone in one treatment. I said, you don't need there's no one on this planet that can do that, depending sometimes, right? So they often take multiple treatments because we're dependent on the biology of the body to do the work. We may injure the vein, we may injure the tattoo ink and fracture it, but the body has to remove it. The other thing is being patient, waiting long enough between treatments, right? Especially for stuff like tattoos or redness. You got to wait till the body takes away whatever it's removing. And then when the tattoo reaccumulates what's sitting there waiting to be, taken up again by the cells that live in the skin. So, biggest misconception, one treatment, it's gone. I want you to remove this scar. I want you to remove these veins. I want you to remove these wrinkles. We'll improve, not remove. I mean, that's my big thing. And how well is it going to work and how quick? Less than you want, slower than you want. Give me a range, 4 to 6 or more or less. Literally, I say these things all day long because that's the truth. Which you can't handle the truth, right? No one wants the truth, but that is the truth.
That's great. Yeah, being involved with tattoo removal, certainly that's the case, right?
But
Patients.
it's a miracle.
Oh,
It is a miracle that you can remove a permanent tattoo and you can make it so you can't see anything. But you're right. You need to wait and you need to be patient.
and you got to be good at it, right? I think that one laser, just a random clinician out there, the results going to you, right? How many tattoo removal you probably have, you're going to use 2, 3 different lasers on someone with a complicated tattoo, and you're going to get removal, right? It's
Well, that's true. And it's your degree of experience is one piece, and the other one's your degree of training and education, right? You have to understand what they're doing. So yeah, that's a great point, actually. And there are a lot of these places opening up. I don't, millions of them, like, where they'll say it's really cheap, and then they go in, the patient comes out having spent $3,000 or $5,000 up front. My feeling is you should be running back trying to break down my door to get back in. I don't need to take everything in the beginning and now you can't get out. Lock the door. When I was young, my family lived in Hungary. And I still have family in Hungary, but it was behind the Iron Curtain. And I always said, how come they can't leave if it's so great? I thought it was great. They can't get out. I'm not being political. I mean, if it's so good, you should be able to come and go and you shouldn't have to lock people in. So you do need, it does matter understanding what you're doing. There's no cookbook. The other misconception is tell me the settings. Settings are different with every patient. And then you need to see the effect of that setting, that you look at that patient with a lot of experience. You look at them with various lighting, you decide what you're going to do. And then once you do it, and there was a good article written by a colleague of mine about this, about looking at endpoints, Matt Avram, of basically what does the skin do when you treat it? Is it doing what you expect based on your extensive experience? And if you don't have extensive experience, I mean, how do you acquire it? I guess you got to go a little at a time, turn it up a little bit each time. Sometimes you have surprises, and as with anything, the longer you do it, the more experience you should get.
yeah, I think the aesthetic world certainly has been leading a lot of the laser research, right? And the publications that you do read do a really good job of explaining, pulse duration, power density, right? They do a pretty good job, but that personal experience, right? Because every skin color is different, every patient's different, right? Really having a mentor, doing some clinicals with others is really key.
No, I agree with you. We have a fellowship here through the ASDS and keeps me on my toes. I have to explain things in ways that make sense. I love having, I mean, listen, I just love having people surrounded by all the time. And so we just had a course here for 32 derm residents in the office here, and it was great. We demoed 8 lasers. I learned things. People asked questions I didn't expect. It's the collaborative process is so important. It's so wonderful here. And universities are doing a better job. It's hard because it's hard to do aesthetics at a university, right? Things that universities are great at, often, it's not that easy to get in and out. And aesthetics, it's not insurance based. People get to choose where they go. Often the aesthetic providers, there's so many constraints on doing studies and overhead. By the time you get approval, it's 6 months. It's like Top Gun. I can get a plane up in 5 minutes. It'll be over in 2 minutes, In aesthetics, you cannot say we'll do something in 6 months. You can't budget for a laser that you're going to buy a year later anymore. You can budget for a computer you're going to buy a year later. It's a different computer in a year. But I will say it is exciting time because there are companies that are doing R&D and they're pushing the envelope and there's new devices for all of us to play with. And the other point you bring up is that the practitioner matters more than the device. I've always said when I'm lecturing, this like Brian Zellickson, he could probably remove my tattoo with a curling iron or a toaster oven, right? Because he's so experienced. So the device matters a lot, but the practitioner matters the most because they're going to have tools that they know how to use and to accomplish whatever your objective is. So that's the most important thing. And how do you find a good one? Well, you look on the web, you can sort of tell. And then you got to ask physicians or practitioners that you trust. Who would you go to? Or you're in another state. Besides you, who would you go to? Or you don't have this device. Who would you go to for this device? And you ask other patients, people that have had experience. That's the best way to find out.
Yeah, I think that's
Don't ask a
important.
movie star. Do not ask a movie star. I
I
don't
think
know what's the
even
story there.
even looking at other areas, right? Like in we did a lot of work in physical therapy and pain. You know, a laser is a tool in the toolbox, right? That can help, but it's only one tool in the toolbox. And I think your point working with physicians and seeing, what tools are missing, right? And which tools does someone want, and how can we train, other doctors, other physicians on how to use these tools to get the best outcomes for patients. Thinking that it's going to be one end all do all is really naive.
Well, I'll tell you about your laser. You developed a joint laser that you brought me one to play with, and I treated my Great Dane, who really helped actually. It was for vet. But then I had a fellow, and my fellow's a surgeon, does a lot of spreading. He had a joint issue with his thumb, and he wanted to use the laser. And I said, "Look, I can't treat you with this laser. Can I say this here? I don't know what's going to happen." And I guess your laser was approved for people, right?
Yeah.
So I can. So, but we weren't treating patients with it here. I was using it. You gave it to me to use at home, but it was a people laser. So he said, "Well, I'm going to do it on myself if you don't do it on me." And so, knowing him and how new he was, I did it. And I got to tell you, in like, it was literally 3 treatments. I forget the interval, whatever interval you told me. Now, generally, my rule number one, do not take treatment advice from a sales rep but you're not a sales rep, you're the inventor. And I took your treatment advice and it is still better. This is like 6 or 8 years ago. I know you, so you probably didn't want me to talk about your stuff because you're kind of a humble guy, but it was pretty impressive. And was I skeptical? I mean, I wasn't about the science, but I'm skeptical about everything. I think what it really is I just hate disappointment. So whenever I do anything, I always think it's not going to work. And then when it works, I'm blown away. I used to work with a guy at Estee Lauder, late Joe Gubernick, who was a genius, a giant in skincare. He came up, head of product development, R&D, like 37 years at Lauder, just a brilliant guy. And then we did studies together with and without devices on topicals. And he said, "Why are you so surprised when it works?" Of course it works. Like we have great science. So, but that is the beauty of discovery, right? Of getting something first. You've done that. You invented stuff that no one had. And that's just really fun. I mean, I would love to work with you on some of that going forward. I think it's really, I'd love to see more people get excited by that, and I want to see more collaboration. I used to have a meeting called the Photobiology Working Group, and we honored, I don't know, did you ever go to that?
No.
That was probably before I met you, but we honored Fred Urbach, Kais Kaibi, Rox Anderson, a bunch of photobiologists, and we had probably 50 people here from J&J, all these big companies, L'Oreal, device companies, and it was just to discuss what's new and what we're doing. And it was anything to do with photobiology. That means lasers, light sources, artificial research on, from Temple we had Don Forbes. We honored Don Forbes, the great Don Forbes, who I still meet with. We talk about some cool stuff, sterilization. It's another area I like working in. It's just being a germaphobe, sterilization's fabulous. Got my what you call it, gel, my Purell right here. So, you know, I love. I've been talking to the ASP, American Society of Photobiology, about trying to collaborate with some of the other societies, because I think if we can do that more as scientists, or the ASLMS, ASDS, we'll get. You always get great plants springing up when you mix a bunch of seeds in there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's an exciting time in, PDT. People are using PDT now for photo disinfection. There's nanoparticles, right, for photothermal. Like there's all kinds of really cool things. And I think, what I love working with aesthetic docs like yourself, because you're not afraid of lasers, right? It's not a new concept. Like you used all of them. I bring a different wavelength, a different pulse duration. It's fine. Let's see what it could do. But I think it's a good time. I'm really excited too about many different applications, and how photobiomodulation could potentially play, right? In wound healing, post-surgery, post-thing. So it is an exciting time. Maybe a good time to kick off something like that again and start collaboration.
Photobiomodulation, it's definitely time, especially like you're talking about wound healing. That's the other thing I studied at NIH was wound healing and PDT really. And in fact, our first inventions with the group at NIH were in the late 80s. I was four at the time when I worked at NIH, but it was, really need-based sort of devices. They were devices at the time, that we were looking at to kind of further, like necessity being the mother of invention, just like you said. So yeah, no, I agree with you. Now is the time. And PDT, it's fascinating how it's not only endured but evolved. Although a lot of the photosensitizers have been around since back then.
Yeah,
They've just been perfected and changed, kind of forwarded. You look at laser hair removal. Who would have thought? And that's biology, because you're not killing the hair. What was the purpose? We're going to kill these follicles, right? I wouldn't participate with laser hair removal when the first laser came out. It was a ruby. The biopsies showed you're scarring the follicle. I said, forget it. We need our follicles. Then the next one came out. Bob Grove and his group at Star Medical came out with an 810 nanometer diode. I looked at the histology and I saw these little, I thought they were telogen or weird catagen, whatever, these small follicles that didn't have a hair, but the follicle was still there. I said, I'm in. And we started doing it. And now you got these, massive spot sizes. Used to take, I went on the news and said, I got this new laser, it can treat your back. What does it cost? $300. I hadn't done it yet on anyone's back, only small areas. It took like 3.5 hours. I was making like $4 an hour when you got down to it. And I was obligated to treat everyone. Well, now you can treat it back in 10 minutes. They really have advanced the field, but it's still biology. There's those rare people that grow hair instead of losing the hair. Cool sculpting, Zeltique, you're freezing fat. Another, great invention, works great. But there's a very tiny subset of people who will grow fat because it's the inflammatory response of the body that takes away the fat, that takes away the hair,
yeah,
right? And sometimes that response doesn't do what we think. And that's what makes it frustrating and exciting to be in our field, right?
interesting. So
Yeah.
what are you working on now that's exciting? What currently
Oh
doing
man.
studies?
So
Currently, what are you doing?
so I'm doing some cool stuff. So I'm working with some of these new vascular lasers, just doing clinical trials to see if there's increased efficacy. And because you have bigger spots and things you can do that you can't otherwise do. These are incremental projects. Facial redness, neck redness, chest, etc. I'm working with the ultra clear laser. I'm the chief medical officer. To me, it's truly different. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know, a lot of sort of debate and this and that, but it's 5,000 hertz. So it's very low energy pulses, but just a ton of them in a second. So you can do crazy things. You can drill holes of any size. You can
Hmm.
put ablative pulses along with coagulative pulses. And so what's really exciting about that is, to me, I'm using it all day long. And am I biased? Well, I'm biased because at my stage, I believe I can almost work with anybody I want, and if something's new. I mean, if I offer myself for free, I could probably work with anybody unless somebody finds me particularly annoying and talkative, right? But I chose them sort of to work with uh, from the beginning. When they came to me with a concept, I said, I want to do this. It's before there was any FDA cleared device. We did the FDA studies, got the device. I'm able to do things that I couldn't do before with so much confidence and lack of side effect, like treat all skin types for acne, scarring, and wrinkles. And again, experts can do it with any device, but I find it delegable. I can do it. I don't worry. I'm a worrier. I always teach about complications. So looking at the histology, what it's doing under the microscope with my buddy Brian Zellickson in Minnesota, just seeing what that laser can do is one of the more exciting things. I'm in discussions with people with some devices that are new that aren't yet out and may not even be built yet. That's another form. So the sort of that skunk works where you don't have a device yet, you're not sure. Then the device where there's only one, that's kind of the next phase. And then the kind of advancing the devices that are already there. I'm looking at a new pico laser for tattoo removal. Is it better? It's an incremental, maybe more power, easier to use, cost effective, stuff like that, modular. So yeah, stuff like that's what I'm doing now, and I'm hoping to do some photobiomodulation with my good friend Brian Pryor because he's a brilliant dude, and it's time. We're at an inflection point, so we need to be moving fast, and we need to pick projects that are meaningful and not go down those rabbit holes you worry about on interviews and in real life of chasing things that don't deserve our time.
Yeah. And what's a good meeting do you suggest people coming into the field, like whether
So if you're
aesthetics or
coming into
laser,
the
what's a good,
aesthetic field and well, if you're a dermatologist, the
yeah,
ASDS all the way, but that's a
right.
derm meeting. The ASLMS, I mean, everybody's there. And it's a small meeting. I bet it's a laser guy calling me. It's a small meeting so that, you know, you can really interface with the company, see and hold the devices. That all the devices are at ASLMS. If you're a dermatologist, they're all at ASDS. Um, you know, the American Society of Photobiology, to me, the ASP meeting is if you're a scientist and you're studying photobiomodulation, photoaging, that is a fabulous meeting. Those are the big ones to me. Do you have any others? Like, what do you think? There's probably some
Yeah, I
science.
think those are the ones, I attend. I think SPIE bio,
I'm not
photonic.
smart enough. I don't think I've ever been invited there. They're too smart, but I would love to go to SPIE, actually. Yeah, that is a great one.
Yeah, that's a good meeting. It's a big meeting and there's a lot of different focuses, but like there's a lot of PDT. There's some
But
photobiomodulation.
do you
So
have a lot
that's
of clinicians there or no?
it's a mix. It's a mix.
It is.
There's not enough physicians. More physicians should come. You should bring your buddies
Well,
and
listen, man, I'll come with my crew. If you just tell me when it is, we'll go because I think I'd really have fun doing that.
yeah, you would. It's a
Where
good,
is it this
good.
year? Do you know?
It's always in San Francisco, mid-January.
Perfect. That's
Yeah,
perfect, actually.
yeah. So
Cool.
yeah, that's a good one. So thanks, Eric. It's we've taken enough of your time. I know you're in between patients. One question we ask all guests, kind of what's bringing you joy, whether scientifically, personally, like right now, what's bringing you joy?
The best thing for me is people. So my family, my kids, my dog, my buddies, my crew, meeting new people, just like getting new laser devices. We were just at a film festival out on Long Island, and I did a little documentary, and I'll talk to anybody. Walking the dog, I met a guy who's a producer. His wife does documentaries. I think people bring me the most joy, and then doing stuff outside. Beach stuff, boating, biking, hiking, but mostly hanging with my core crew and meeting more crew. That's what brings me the biggest joy. And that's why meetings like you're talking about, that's when you can get together. So
Great.
that's it.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been, I think, great, great insight into, device design and what's going on new in aesthetics. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. I'm sure the audience has learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much. This could have gone on all afternoon. I'm sure we didn't really touch on PDT or advice you would give young people coming into the market, into the profession, which is some of the
You got to
places
bring
we
me
go.
back. You
So
got to
we'll
bring me
just have
back.
to come back for part two. But I would say I would like to thank BW Tech for sponsoring it. If people have any questions or would like to suggest speakers or would demand a second volume of Dr. Bernstein, then info@aimler.org would be the place to go. And I believe that www.dermguy, which is probably the best website name ever, DERMGUY, is where they can find out about your practice and what's going on, right?
Yeah, sure. And there's a lot of laser information on there as
There's
well.
a lot of lasers on there. Yeah, as a laser guy, I
Well,
spent
there's also a
way too
website.
much time on your website.
Well, there's a website that doesn't involve me, and it's dermatologist.net. We put it up. And why did I do it? I have no idea. There's no commercial purpose whatsoever, but I had stuff to say, and I have more on there about photo aging and photobiology, and I just felt like I had to put it out there. So it's dermatologist.net. I used to own this web company, so I have these URLs. But that's also a place to get laser and photobiology information that really has no other purpose to it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. We appreciate your time today. I'm sure listeners have a lot of questions and would welcome second volume. So thanks so much today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Thanks, Eric.